looking out into my garden and I was seeing that today needs to be some maintenance done. Squash has been the bane of my existence. When I say squash, I mean squash, zucchini, winter squash, butternut squash, pumpkins, basically anything like that. It is just notoriously gives me a harder time. So I'm trying to really be diligent and stay on top of it this year. But before we get started on squashes and stuff, I need to get rid of these peas and just give them to the chickens and be done because it all factors together. Well, that was the last of the great equalizer of peas. So from here on out, the baby chicks are on their own to try and mingle with everybody. I've been using them as a peacekeeper, and now that the peas are gone and the trellis is once again totally empty, we're just gonna work with it. But that's part of the whole squash situation too. So my squashes, you know, I have a couple arch nemesises with the squashes. One is a squash vine borer, and if calculations are correct based on studies done, then in my certain area, the squash vine borer should be emerging next week, but I'm gonna go ahead and say from now on, just depends on the weather and all that stuff. So I need to take time to be vigilant about that. And then you've got powdery mildew that can be an issue, and you've got squash bugs, and it's like, my goodness, could there be anything else? So generally I take a little bit of time and I kind of look through my squashes. This year I'm gonna take a little bit more time and really try and focus on it because I want to try and eliminate these problems as much as possible. And so that's why I'm just literally gonna sit here right now and I'm going to inspect these squashes greatly. So I started a treatment regimen last night actually for the squash vine borer, where this year I'm trying to spray BT every 7 days on here to try and get it before they come in. And now, I mean, one good thing we see is this is desi squash, and we've got 1, 2 desi squash on this plant, so that's good. And I'm just gonna be flipping over leaves and stuff like that, looking for any kind of crazy damage. Like this is damage from an insect. So we need to really keep an eye out for this guy. And then as far as for the powdery mildew, I'm also gonna be trimming the squashes in here. And so that's gonna help immensely with that whole deal as well, getting that powdery mildew down, getting this airflow going through here, and just keeping it flowing so things can dry out as needed. All right, so there's a couple things to show you here, and I'm gonna start with what I look for when I'm trimming, and then I'll go through to insect damage, eggs, you know, on down the line, and general health as well. But as far as the trimming goes, right now these plants are fairly young. So we just basically look to clean them up a little bit. So for right now, the spacing is pretty good in here. I mean, as we go through, you can see air can flow through, but we have certain leaves like this one right here. It's not really doing anything. It's gonna lay on the ground and it's definitely gonna encourage some disease. So we're just gonna get rid of that. And we'll go through here, and anything that's like touching or laying on the ground, I start to get rid of, especially right now while the plant's young. I don't really want to take this off because this is what's bringing the energy into the plant. So, but these real small shaded ones, that stuff doesn't really matter too much. So, I mean, you could even have an argument for this leaf to take it or leave it. Since I'm out here, I like to just go ahead and just do it, and then we don't have to worry about it as much. So we just kind of work our way all the way around. And I bet there's gonna be for each plant maybe 2 or 3 total leaves to take off. So we'll find out. So clearly I was way off on the amount of leaves that had to be taken off, and that's a good thing. That means that for once, I'm actually doing something fairly right. So this is all we had to take off. So just a handful of leaves, and I don't ever put these in the compost just because squash is known to carry disease. If I don't see any visible disease on it early enough in the year, then I will definitely give them to the chickens. But I just gave them those peas, so we're just gonna kind of toss them out in the woods and let nature have its way. So the other thing too, and right now it's not that big a deal, is gonna be like powdery mildew and stuff like that. And that's a real easy one to see. Just kind of glance over your leaves and you're just looking for that powdery substance. But I do have something here that I want to show you that you do need to be careful of when it comes to that. And the reason why it's not a big deal right now is just because it's, you know, this time of year, it's not very humid. And not to mention that I'm not overhead watering this year, so we may have less of an issue with that. That was one reason why we decided to do it. So we'll see how that goes, but just glance over it and see if you have anything powdery going on. And I don't really have anything very powdery happening here. I do, if you come over here and you'll see these leaves right here, how they have that white on them. That just is a different variety. So you do need to be cognizant of that. But overall, there's nothing else going on here as far as disease goes that I can tell. This is another one that has the other colors on it. And this is actually a Seminole pumpkin. So I accidentally put, I thought I was putting 2 in there, but they actually are either 2 zucchinis or 2 squashes. So I came back and replanted. And typically I would remove them, but I think what I'm gonna do, because disease and pests can be such an issue, is I'm just gonna let it grow and see. Now if the Seminole pumpkin starts to suffer, then I'll pull them out immediately. But they're just getting going, and once they start climbing, they should be good, because we're gonna train them up the cattle panel too. So it shouldn't be that much of an issue. Now, insects is a whole new game. And I'm gonna start with the squash vine borer and then kind of work my way down from there. So for the squash vine borer, there's a few misconceptions out there. So what I do, and I've always read, is you start looking at the base down in here and you'll see a little red dot. So what that tells you is that's the squash vine borer egg. Now what I've learned in the past is you have to look all up in here, because they can lay all around here too. And I've seen them go in here, crawl their way down into the plant, and then chew the base of the plant up. So you just kind of want to look for it and see if you see anything. It's gonna be hard to see. That's why it's such an evil plant or evil bug, because it is hard to see and it's not really, you know, very obvious sometimes. And when you see the egg, it's already too late, because what that means is they're emerging out of the soil. So this year what we did is we actually came through, and I'm curious to see how much of an issue this is gonna arise. And I'm sure we'll still have them. But because I put a couple inches of soil on the ground, thinking that maybe I buried the larvae and so it can't emerge, at least out of like the beds that I added, so it might help keep the numbers down. But it's always like a thing. So we're gonna keep trying to treat for them this year and try and weather the storm as much as possible. But now that these are starting to produce squash, and we'll see some baby squash here in a second, I'm probably gonna go ahead and start some more squash seeds soon, because the squash vine borer, which is the most devastating part of any squash plant, is, you know, it's a small period of time. It's like a month, and then it goes away. So if you can weather that storm for a month, keep your plants alive, keep them off of your plants, and you can cover your plants too, that might help. But if they're coming out of the ground, you're just gonna trap them in there. Then, you know, you should be okay. But I'm never okay, ever, 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 ever. I don't think I've ever had a plant that I did not have to baby because of the squash vine borer. Lord willing, everything goes good, we will have some squash here in a couple days. So that is good, that we will at least get to enjoy some kind of harvest. But going through here, we're seeing a lot of blooms. We're seeing a lot of, you know, baby squashes of different varieties in here. There's like 2 or 3 on this plant, a couple on this plant, 1 or 2 on this one. And then if you come in the back here, this one got blown around, so I'm probably gonna stake it up so I want it to come this way. Might have a couple over here. So all in all, this bed right here is actually in good shape. And so the last thing I check for is I just flip over leaves and I start looking for eggs. You're looking for squash bug eggs. They look like little copper balls, and I just smash them when I see them. But that leads me to believe that it is time to treat with some neem oil for that. But as I go through, I don't really see anything crazy. So, and I can kind of glance from here. You know, they kind of stick out, especially when see this leaf right here that's laying, you can see the sun coming through. You can see the eggs under it. They're not super tiny by any stretch of the imagination, but we should not be very far off from having the squash bugs moving. I can tell you that much. Or stink bugs, or any of the other fun stuff that you have to deal with. Now I do think it's time, so we're seeing squash on every single plant out here. I think it's time to go in the greenhouse and see if we're actually getting pollination. I wanted to see if we'd get some natural pollination or if it's something that we're gonna have to do manually. Like I said, this greenhouse has been a test this year, but we're gonna go in, look at the 2 zucchini plants and see if there's actually something going on in there, or if we're just kind of wasting our time by not doing it ourselves. So other than the fact that it's hot as fire in here, everything seems to be doing well. But it appears as if we are not getting pollination in here. Yep, not good. That's not good for me. My whole goal was to get squash or zucchini out of here earlier and protect them from the squash vine borer. That's clearly not gonna happen, but now we know. It's already getting, like yesterday's like 101 in there during the day, so I fear that it's gonna be getting too hot, but everything else is doing good in there, and you just learn the lesson, right? You don't know until you try. I think what the lesson for me is, if you're gonna use a greenhouse, you need to put something that can be wind pollinated in there and not dependent on like insect pollination or something like that. Because I really don't like hand pollinating. It's just kind of a pain in the butt. But we'll see. Plus you gotta catch them when the flowers are open. And because it gets so hot in there, they're closing up and falling off rather quickly. But you know, a cloudy day, we might be able to catch it, but otherwise I think it's gonna be a waste of time. And so the okra in there may be the same thing, but the difference is we're getting the honeybees soon and the hive is like right there. So they should be able to go in. That's why we leave the door open, stuff like that. And you know, the colors of the flowers and stuff. Now, if I put flowers around the outside of this, which could be something we do in the future, that may definitely and probably will help to bring pollinators into that. Funny story, actually not too funny, but brought the tractor back here and loaded up Cletus to put the center blocks in, and I ran out of gas and just haven't gone to get gas yet. But we wanted, I just walked through this giant spider web, check it out. Ugh, I hate getting spider webs in my mouth. So these peas are gone now. And the whole idea with that is we seeded our winter pumpkins here because the last ones kind of messed up a little bit. So we're gonna leave this one here and see if it takes, but this one, not too much. And it's really dry, so I need to come out and water it. So I'll do that today. But we did that because the way the sun hits, it comes over this way. And so if we put something here, when it grows up, it's just gonna shade out this other side right here. So that's why we pulled all the peas off, so we could try and get a jump start on this. And once we get pumpkins to pop here, then we're gonna turn around and immediately plant our black-eyed peas on the other side. So, because, you know, once things start to grow, they grow pretty fast. You just got to get them germinated. So once we do that, then it's off to the races, and then hopefully we can get the black-eyed peas in the ground and get them going, because that's, like I said in the previous video, that's an important crop for us. But it's just allowing the sun to get through to feed it. And then once we get, so the plan with the pumpkins is to get them to come up to about right here. And then we're gonna feed them off of the edge, kind of like we did with the winter squash last year. And so, I mean, we'll try and feed them up more, but the goal is to get pumpkins, and if they're actually putting on fruits, and they wouldn't be able to go all the way across, so we'd have to hang them down at some point. And so it's just more chance of breakage of the plant. So we want to just try and let it kind of go this way. And even if we can get it like this one to come up and go this way and then come down to the other side, it, you know, it'll still get more sun than if it just grew straight up here with the black-eyed peas bothering it here. I really don't want to hate growing squash. This year I'm really going to focus on trying to keep it going throughout the year, and that's why I did a whole bed of it. You know, all the pest problems and issues it has, I'm just gonna have to move on from it and just deal with it and just stay on top of it. And I think we'll be rewarded for it in the process. Even if it does succumb to disease or whatever, we should still get a pretty good harvest. So yeah, I hope you guys like growing squash and it's easier for you than it is me. But down here, it's just something that you just expect to die. And it's kind of a struggle, but this year is going to be different. We are going to make a difference with our squash, and I will begin to love it. Good.